Hey everyone, and welcome back to Key Safety Talks. We love to take these deep dives, and today we're going to be looking at engineering economics. Now, I know that might not sound like the most thrilling topic at first glance, but trust me when I say this stuff is crucial, especially if you're a safety pro who really wants to make a difference out there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's about way more than just crunching numbers, This is about getting that financial fluency we need to really fight for safer workplaces, justify the investments that we need, and make smart decisions that really protect people at the end of the day.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
So often we know that safety is important, but how do we convince the people holding the purse strings? They speak a different language, and that's where this financial side comes in.
Yeah.
So let's just start with the basics. What do we need to get our heads around first?
Well, we have to start with interest. It's one of those fundamental building blocks. You can't avoid it. Think of it as the cost of borrowing money. Or you can think of it as the reward for lending money. It's kind of two sides of the same coin. And there are two main types: simple and compound interest.
Okay, so simple interest. That sounds simple enough. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So simple interest is only calculated on that initial amount that you borrow or invest. That's called the principal. So imagine you're borrowing, let's say, $50,000 for like a really important safety upgrade. And the bank says, all right, 6% interest rate for 3 years. Simple interest is what you pay on top of that original $50,000.
Okay, so in that case, how much extra are we talking about?
Well, with simple interest, it's pretty straightforward to calculate. You just multiply the interest rate and the number of years. So in this case, it'd be $50,000 times 0.06 times 3, and that comes out to $9,000 in interest. So the total cost of that safety upgrade over those 3 years would be $59,000.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But you also mentioned compound interest, so what's the difference there?
Well, this is where it gets a little more interesting. Compound interest is kind of like the snowball effect of finance. It's not just calculated on the principal, but it's also calculated on any interest that's already built up. So it's interest on interest, and that can really add up over time, especially for like those long-term projects or investments.
Okay, I can see how that would get out of hand. Can you give us an example of how that might work in the real world?
Sure. So let's say you're looking at two different options for a new ventilation system. One has a lower upfront cost, but it needs a lot of frequent maintenance, And then the other one has a higher initial price tag, but the maintenance costs are way lower over time. Compound interest can help you compare those costs over, let's say, 10 years. You factor in both the initial investment and those recurring costs. And it might reveal some hidden savings or costs that you wouldn't see with just a simple calculation.
So it's like having a financial crystal ball then. We can peek into the future and see how much these decisions are going to cost us down the line.
Exactly. And that's super important for safety investments, because we're often dealing with those long-term plans and big upfront costs. You don't want to get hit with some unexpected expenses later on.
For sure. Okay, compound interest is officially on my radar now. So we've talked about interest, which is the cost of borrowing money. But how do we factor in the fact that money itself changes value over time?
Right. Well, that's where this idea of the time value of money comes in. It's this idea that the money you have right now in your hand, it's worth more than that same amount in the future. Because right now, it has the potential to grow through investments or earn interest.
So I'd rather have $10,000 today than a promise of $10,000 5 years from now. Because I could invest that money today and have even more in 5 years.
Exactly. And this is a really important idea for safety professionals, because we're always making decisions about investing in safety measures now to prevent potential costs or losses in the future. It's like if a company decides to skimp on fire protection to save a few bucks right now, they might end up paying a way bigger price down the line if a fire actually happens. Rebuilding lawsuits, lost business, it all adds up. Understanding the time value of money helps us make the case for investing in safety up front.
Yeah, this is making me think about some of those big industrial accidents we've seen, like the Bhopal disaster. Cost-cutting measures ended up causing that horrible gas leak. It killed thousands of people, and the environmental damage is still felt today.
Yeah, that's a really powerful example of how those short-sighted financial decisions, the ones that don't think about the long-term consequences, can have absolutely devastating effects.
It's a powerful reminder for sure. So how do we actually use this time value of money idea when we're doing calculations?
Well, there are a few key calculations that come into play here. And the formulas might look a little scary at first. But don't worry, the main ideas are actually pretty easy to grasp.
All right, lay it on us. What's the first one?
So one important calculation is figuring out the future value of money. And this is basically a way to project how much a current investment will be worth at a specific point in the future, given a certain interest rate, of course.
Oh, so it's like a financial time machine then.
Yep.
We can see how much our money will grow over time.
Exactly. Let's say you've got $100,000 set aside for a major safety upgrade in 5 years. You can use a reasonable interest rate and calculate the future value. And that gives you a clearer picture of your budget for that project down the road.
That's super helpful for planning.
Yeah.
Wouldn't want to underestimate our budget and then have to scramble later.
Right. And this also helps us make a stronger case for investing in safety. By showing how an investment will grow over time, you can show them that putting that money in now will lead to a larger pool of money dedicated to safety in the future.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to see how powerful these ideas can be. But what about the opposite scenario? What if we know we need a specific amount of money in the future, but we need to figure out how much to save each year to get there?
Right. Well, that's where this thing called the sinking fund factor comes in. It's like a reverse time machine. It helps us figure out the regular payments we need to make, think of them like installments, to reach a specific financial goal in the future.
So it's like setting up a dedicated savings account for a future safety project.
Precisely. Imagine you need $1 million in 10 years. To replace a really important piece of equipment, the sinking fund factor, along with an estimated interest rate, tells you exactly how much to put away each year to hit that $1 million mark.
That takes all the guesswork out of those big safety upgrades.
Exactly, and it shows that you're being proactive about safety management. You have a plan that not only shows the need for the investment, but also how you're going to get there financially. That's responsible leadership.
Okay, this is all starting to click. So just to recap, we've talked about simple and compound interest. We've got the time value of money, future value, and now this sinking fund factor. What else do we need in our financial toolbox?
Well, there are a couple more concepts that are closely related to what we've talked about, but let's save those for the next part of our conversation. We can delve a little deeper and look at more real-world examples of how this all works.
Sounds good. For everyone listening, stay tuned for part 2. We'll unlock even more of these financial tools and see how they translate into real-world safety improvements.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back to Key Safety Talks. In the last part, we talked about the basics of engineering economics and how it can be a powerful tool for safety professionals.
Yeah, we sure did. We covered simple and compound interest, that mind-bending concept of the time value of money, and even figured out how to predict the future, financially speaking, with future value and that handy sinking fund factor.
It's all about building that financial toolkit, right? And remember, we're not aiming to become accountants here. We're learning how to use these concepts to champion safety improvements and make those rock-solid decisions.
Because at the end of the day, it's about protecting people and preventing those would've, could've, should've moments that we see all too often when things go wrong.
You got it. So let's put these concepts to work, shall we? Imagine you're a safety manager at a manufacturing plant, and you've got your eye on some new safety harnesses for your team. They're not cheap, but, they're essential.
Well, I've been there. Trying to justify those necessary but not immediately exciting expenses can be a real challenge.
It can be. Let's say each harness is $500 and you need 20 of them. That's a $10,000 investment right there. How do you convince management that it's money well spent?
All right, time to put on my financial thinking cap. I guess I could start by highlighting the potential costs of not investing in the harnesses. Accidents happen and falls can lead to serious injuries. Medical bills, lost work time, even lawsuits.
Exactly. And that's where you start speaking their language, the language of dollars and cents. You can back up your argument with hard data. Look at past accident records, industry statistics, even workers' compensation claims. Paint a clear picture of the financial risks they're taking by neglecting this safety upgrade.
So it's about connecting those dots between safety and the bottom line. Show them that an accident doesn't just impact someone's well-being, it hits their wallet too.
Right on. But you can take it a step further. Remember, return on investment. Well, think about the ROI of these new harnesses. Maybe they prevent a single fall that would have cost the company tens of thousands in medical expenses and legal fees. Suddenly, that $10,000 investment looks pretty smart.
It's like that old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But now we're backing it up with numbers.
And don't forget those less tangible but equally important benefits. A safer work environment boosts morale, improves productivity, and helps you attract and retain skilled workers. You're building a culture of safety, and that's priceless.
Okay, I'm feeling empowered already.
Yeah.
But let's get even more specific. What about a scenario where we're dealing with a potential disaster like a fire? Those stakes are high.
Absolutely. Let's say a company is considering a new fire suppression system for their warehouse. A big warehouse packed with flammable materials. we're talking about a potential for massive loss if a fire breaks out.
Oh, I'm getting flashbacks to news reports of those devastating warehouse fires that have caused millions in damages and even tragically loss of life.
It's a stark reminder of what's at stake. So where does engineering economics come in? Well, the company needs to weigh the potential cost of a fire against the cost of that suppression system. They need to consider property damage, inventory loss, business interruption, even environmental liabilities.
It's like that risk assessment we always talk about, but now we're putting a dollar figure on those potential consequences.
And this is where the concept of future value becomes incredibly relevant. The company can calculate just how much they stand to lose in a worst-case scenario, and then compare that to the cost of the system over its lifespan. Suddenly, that upfront investment in fire suppression starts to look a lot more reasonable.
It's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah.
If the cost of prevention is significantly less than the potential cost of a disaster, it makes perfect financial sense to invest in safety.
You're getting it. It's about making those data-driven decisions that minimize risk and protect the company's assets. And let's not forget, we're not just talking about buildings and inventory here. We're talking about protecting people.
Right, because some things are simply irreplaceable. No amount of money can bring back a life lost due to negligence.
Exactly. So when we use engineering economics in the context of safety, we're not putting a price tag on human life. We're using financial tools to justify those investments that ultimately safeguard people and build a safer world.
It's about using the language of business to advocate for what's right, what's ethical, and what will ultimately create a more sustainable and humane workplace.
Well said. Now, I know you mentioned earlier those big ticket items that companies need to plan for those investments that might seem daunting at first.
Oh, absolutely. Like replacing a piece of critical safety equipment that has a hefty price tag, but is essential for operations.
That's where that sinking fund factor we talked about earlier comes in handy. Remember, it helps us figure out those regular payments we need to make to reach a specific savings goal in the future.
Okay, let's say a company knows they need to replace a piece of equipment in 10 years, and it's going to cost a cool $1 million. How can they use this sinking fund magic to make it happen?
It's like creating a safety savings plan. They can estimate a reasonable interest rate they expect to earn on their savings, maybe 5%, and then plug that into the sinking fund formula, along with that $1 million goal and the time frame of 10 years. The formula will tell them precisely how much to put aside each year.
So they're not just scrambling at the last minute hoping to find $1 million under a cushion. They're making a strategic plan.
Exactly, and the beauty of it is that money they're setting aside is earning interest too, helping them reach their goal faster. It's a win-win.
This is making me feel a lot more financially savvy. But I have to admit, sometimes those formulas can feel a bit intimidating. Is it really realistic for every safety professional to become a math whiz?
I hear you. Not all of us are walking calculators. But the good news is there are tons of resources out there to help us. Think online calculators, software programs, even professional organizations that offer training and support in this area. You don't have to go it alone.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
So we've talked about justifying expenses, planning for those big future investments. What other ways can we use engineering economics in our safety work?
Well, one area where it's incredibly valuable is when you're evaluating different safety options. Let's say you're comparing two types of machine guarding. One is pricier but offers a higher level of protection. The other is more budget-friendly but maybe not as effective in preventing injuries. Tough call, right?
Yeah, it's that classic dilemma, balancing costs with safety. How do we make sure we're making the smartest choice?
Enter engineering economics. You can actually calculate the cost-benefit ratio for each option. Factor in the cost of guarding the potential cost of accidents and the estimated reduction in injuries each option offers. This analysis helps you make a decision based on data, not just gut feeling.
It's like taking the emotion out of the equation and really looking at the numbers.
Yeah.
We're not just choosing the cheapest option. We're finding the option that provides the best value in terms of safety and effectiveness.
You nailed it. And this approach can be applied to all sorts of safety decisions, from selecting personal protective equipment to designing training programs. It's about being a savvy investor in safety.
This is making me think about the bigger picture here. How does understanding engineering economics not just benefit me as a safety pro, but the whole field of safety as a whole?
That's a great question. Think about it. When safety professionals can speak the language of finance, it elevates the entire profession. We're not just seen as the safety police. We're strategic partners who understand the business and can advocate for what's best for everyone.
It's like we're earning a seat at the table with decision makers. We can influence policy changes, make those compelling arguments for resources, and really drive that culture shift where safety is a core value, not an afterthought.
Exactly. And ultimately, that translates to better safety outcomes for everyone. We can use financial data to showcase the value of safety investments, advocate for stricter regulations, and create a world where every worker goes home safe and sound.
I love that vision. It's not just about crunching numbers, it's about using those numbers to build a safer, healthier, and more sustainable future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We've covered a lot in this part, justifying those safety expenses, planning for future investments, and making smart choices when comparing different options. But there's still more to explore.
Right. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll dive into even more advanced concepts and real-world examples of how engineering economics is transforming the field of safety. We'll see you there. Welcome back to Key Safety Talks, everyone. We're in the final stretch of our engineering economics journey. And I have to say, my brain is feeling a lot more financially fit than when we started.
That's great to hear. We've covered a lot of ground, from those interest basics to some pretty powerful financial tools. But as we've seen, it's not just about abstract numbers. It's about how we use these concepts to make workplaces safer and advocate to the resources we need.
Absolutely. And speaking of advocating, something that often comes up in safety discussions is the whole topic of regulations. We know they're crucial for protecting workers, but sometimes they come with a cost for businesses, and that can lead to some pushback.
It's true. We often hear that argument, regulations are too expensive, they're killing businesses. But what we need to remember, and what engineering economics can really help us demonstrate, is that regulations are often put in place as a result of past failures, accidents, injuries, sometimes even tragedies. They're designed to prevent history from repeating itself.
It's like those safety signs that say, "Warning, do not touch hot surface." You wouldn't argue with that sign, right? You've learned from experience, or maybe someone else's unfortunate experience, that touching a hot surface is a bad idea. Regulations are kind of like that sign, but on a much larger scale.
I like that analogy. And just like that sign might save you from a nasty burn, regulations can save companies from much larger costs, financial and human, in the long run.
So how do we use engineering economics to really drive that point home?
Well, we can use it to quantify the costs and benefits of regulations. This means analyzing the cost of compliance for businesses and weighing that against the potential savings from preventing accidents and injuries. Remember, we're talking about reduced medical expenses, fewer workers' compensation claims, less lost productivity, and avoided legal battles.
And let's not forget those harder to measure but equally important benefits, like improved worker morale, a stronger safety culture, and a better reputation for the company.
Those are crucial, and often when we factor in all those costs and benefits, we find that the benefits of safety regulations far outweigh the cost. It's about taking a long-term view, not just focusing on those immediate expenses.
So we can use engineering economics to make the case for stronger safety regulations by actually demonstrating their economic value.
Exactly. We can present that data, those compelling arguments, to policymakers and business leaders and show them that investing in safety isn't just ethically sound, it's fiscally responsible, it's a win-win for everyone.
It's like we're speaking their language, but with the goal of protecting workers and creating a safer environment for everyone.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about another crucial element of safety: training. It's one of the most fundamental ways to prevent accidents and injuries, and thankfully, it's an area where engineering economics can shine a light on its true value.
Oh, absolutely. But I've seen companies that are hesitant to invest in training. They see it as a cost, not an asset. How do we change that perception?
By using those financial tools we've been talking about, we can evaluate the cost effectiveness of different training programs, which is essentially figuring out how much bang we're getting for our buck.
Okay, break it down for us. How do we actually determine if a training program is worth the investment?
Well, we start by looking at the cost of the training itself, materials, instructor fees, maybe even the cost of lost productivity while employees are in training. But then, and this is the key part, we weigh those costs against the potential benefits.
So we're looking at how effective the training is in actually preventing accidents and injuries? We need data, right?
Right. We want to see those incident rates going down, fewer near-miss reports, and positive feedback from employees who feel better equipped to handle safety challenges.
So if a training program leads to a significant drop in accidents and injuries, it's probably a good investment, even if the initial costs seemed high.
Exactly. And to make it even clearer, we can calculate the return on investment for that training. How much money did the company save by preventing accidents compared to how much they spent on the training? Those numbers can be pretty convincing.
It's like we're showing them that investing in training isn't just about checking a box. It's about protecting their bottom line and, most importantly, their people.
It's about shifting that mindset from seeing safety as a cost center to viewing it as a profit driver. A safer workplace is a more productive, efficient, and ultimately more successful workplace.
I love that. As we wrap up our engineering economics journey, what are some key takeaways you want our listeners to walk away with?
Well, first and foremost, I want them to understand that these financial concepts aren't just for number crunchers in suits. They're powerful tools for anyone in the safety profession who wants to make a real impact.
It's about being able to speak the language of business, to advocate for those safety improvements, justify those expenses, and make those data-driven decisions that ultimately save lives.
Exactly. And remember, engineering economics isn't about putting a price tag on human life. It's about using every tool at our disposal to protect people and create a world where everyone can go home safe and healthy at the end of the workday.
It's about quantifying the value of safety, so we can make that compelling case for investing in what truly matters.
And on that note, folks, we've reached the end of our deep dive into engineering economics. We hope you found it informative, engaging, and maybe even a little bit empowering.
And if you're looking for more resources, more support in this area, be sure to check out the Key Safety Talks YouTube channel. I've got a wealth of information there to help you on your safety journey.
Until next time, stay safe, everyone.